This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. Hi. What do you guys want to talk about? This is such good shit. Thanks, guys. Back to you.
Well, folks, it's Monday. And as you can see by today's podcast title, we are bringing you a reduced version of the Monday show this week. I had a lot going on this weekend, once again. And I think I had mentioned on the Friday show that I severely butchered the timeline for the Retro Raw reports. So I kind of needed to adjust for that this week. Otherwise, we were going to be way out of sync for the remaining Raws in 94. You know, at this point, we're close enough to the end of the year where I don't feel guilty leaving out a Raw or two. And, well, while I'm on the subject, I might as well just go ahead and fill you in with what I plan on doing over the next week. So I still want to do a year in review episode for the channel. I'm not sure exactly where I want to put that yet. I can either save it for the Monday edition next week or possibly do it for the following Friday. I mean, as of now, it'll look like it'll happen on Christmas when I'll have that uploaded, which means we will not have a regular Monday show next week. We'll be dipping out on the Retro Raw, Retro NXT, and SmackDown reports. Now, with that said, I want to update everybody about this coming Friday because, you know, that's the show we're pretty consistent with in the Retro series. However, I'm kind of burnt out right now. I think I'm going to end up taking Friday off this week because I'm very much out of sorts right now with how I usually pre-plan for the Friday shows. Like, I need to set aside a lot of time in the evening to actually watch and take notes for those programs. So far, I just haven't had the chance to do it. I mean, I was almost considering not doing a Monday show this week. That's how pressed for time I've been. I mean, it's really, really late in the evening as I'm recording this right now. And, you know, Monday's going to be hectic again for me. So to save myself the torture of having to cram in 3 retro reviews in the span of like 2 days, I think I'm just going to take the rest of the week off. I'm going to get everything together for next week's FSWR special because I'm probably going to need all that time if I'm being honest. So bear that in mind. You know, if you don't see a show uploaded this Friday, I'm not dead. You know, I just decided that I need to take a week off. So no NWA, no Mid-South, no World Class Review. We will reconvene the following week as normal. And, you know, hopefully as we transition into the new year, things will slow down for a little bit. But do things ever slow down, really? No, things usually slow down when I'm watching SmackDown from week to week. But you know, other times we'll get a bone thrown our way. These shows never cease to amaze me. Every time I think to myself, man, these people aren't even trying to write good, compelling television. Every once in a while, they'll pull out shows where they throw everything out but the kitchen sink. And then I'm reminded that they can do good television. They're just lazy. Now, it's not to say the shows blow away or anything, but in comparison to a lot of the shows I've seen in the last couple of months, at least they were trying to bring out some name power for this one. You know, it's amazing to think what a little bit of star power can actually do to elevate your program. When you actually try to feature the top guys that are over and people actually pay to see. It automatically makes the show more appealing. Even then bringing back Roman this week, it immediately elevates the status of the bloodline again. The problem when you have Solo, Jimmy, and Paul E out there is that we pretty much know the end result before it ever happens. One of them will wrestle a match. Evidently, if Jimmy's involved, he's going to lose. And then they'll just beat up the babyface afterwards and get their heat back. But there's no real yearning to see what happens afterwards because, let's just call it like it is. They're prelim guys. But once you get Roman involved, you know they're going to take things more seriously. So you get the whole group coming out at the start of the show. Of course, it's WWE, so they have to milk the shit out of everything as long as humanly possible. I think we were like 7 or 8 minutes in before we actually got to anything of substance. And the best part of this entire opening segment was all the stuff that happened early on before Randy Orton came out. Easily one of the greatest things I've ever seen Jimmy Uso involved with since, certainly anything I can recall in recent memory. Roman's out there talking about how there's one heir to the bloodline throne, the next tribal chief. This man has stepped up and done everything to make sure that Roman stays at the top of the mountain. This is where WWE production is so great because, they capture these moments perfectly in the frame. Because while Roman's dressing up this person, he's putting him over, there's all this suspense and all this buildup. Keep in mind, we're all supposed to assume he's talking about Jimmy because he's standing right behind Roman the whole time. And he's smiling. He's all perky and trying to doll himself up for the camera for the big reveal. And then Roman goes, "Jimmy, join me in congratulating your brother, Solo." And then right as Roman goes in for the hug, Jimmy has to try to play it cool like, "Oh yeah, right. I knew that." So he just slithers back over into place with his hands folded. And then Roman just keeps going with his promo. It was so great. Jimmy's performance was outstanding here. And then, of course, that all segues into Randy's interruption, where he basically comes out and tells Roman that for 18 months, he's been stewing on how he's going to respond to being taken out by the bloodline. Of course, Roman just gives him a snide remark and goes, "Dude, that's funny because, I haven't thought to you about it all in the past 18 months. While Roman's running down Orton and telling him to walk away before the bloodline end his career for good, Orton responds by putting over Roman as more than just a great champion. He's a legend. He's earned that status. But then Orton reminds everybody that he's the legend killer. So as he tries to go in for the RKO on Roman ducks it. Then Orton makes a joke about Roman crapping his pants and telling him to stay on high alert because Randy's issuing the challenge to Roman for a title match at the Royal Rumble. And this part was all fine. Nothing on the level of that interaction with Jimmy and the rest of the bloodline earlier on, though. That was peak WWE comedy. Roman just totally undercutting Jimmy and leaving his balls out to dry. Jimmy just standing there having to take it. The stuff with Roman and Randy, that was more or less whatever. Personally, I'm not all that hyped to see the match. Not unless Matt Riddle returns and fucks Orton out of the belt. Which I know would piss off a lot of people, and that's exactly why I want to see it. Just because it would be a great troll job. But it seems highly unlikely. I don't know. I've been pretty outspoken about the fact that I'm not really a Randy Orton fan. Never have been. I don't really see this as an epic title match for one of their big four. I also don't ever see a scenario where Orton beats Roman to win the title. I think a lot of it's going to deal with the fallout. We all kind of figured that they'll have something planned for Randy Orton come Mania season. So you think they would probably use that match to either tease or maybe set something up for later on. But that's my general take on it. Not a bad segment, but the idea of Roman Reigns versus Randy Orton on paper, it's not really all that striking to me. But from there, we go to one of the first round matches in the U.S. title tournament they're doing to try to figure out who's going to challenge Logan Paul for the U.S. title next. And, well, let me start by saying this. First of all, the NXT mystery guy they were advertising, it was not Braun Breaker. It was wishful thinking on my part. It was actually Carmelo Hayes, a guy that I had completely forgotten about, dating all the way back to those classic NXT 2.0 recaps we were doing once upon a time. Yeah, the good old days on the channel when I actually had patience. Y'all remember Carmelo and his bodyguard Trick? Yeah, they were bout it. Now Carmelo's bout it on the main roster without Trick as a side piece. I assume this was his official call-up because he won the match. Spoiler. Would I have made his first match against Grayson fucking Fodder? No. I'd have considered putting him in there with a wet floor sign before having Carmelo wrestle Grayson Fodder. Christ, the floor sign would probably show more personality on camera. Before I talk about the match, though, I want to address something that I really hated about this. Nothing about the match. It's a small thing they did that I don't think a lot of people are going to pick up on, but it bugged me in particular, so I'm going to bitch about it. The inset promo with Logan Paul, where he basically spent like a full minute burying Carmelo Hayes and pretty much acknowledging, I have no idea who you are. I'm not sure what kind of Make-A-Wish charity you want in order to earn this spot, but good luck in the ring tonight, random guy. And for the record, he did use the words random guy. I get he's a heel. I get he's supposed to be a pompous douchebag. But this is not the kind of stuff you should be doing when you're trying to establish new talent. Like having Logan Paul basically say, this guy's a nobody from the onset. You want to know what that does for the people that have never actually seen Carmelo Hayes before? It makes them think, oh, guess it really isn't that important after all, since the bigger celebrity star is already burying him. There's a time and a place to have heels try to degrade the babyface, but you can't do it before we've actually seen the fucking guy wrestle on the main roster. I don't care what he's done in NXT. It's a smaller audience watching. A lot of people that watch Raw and SmackDown don't follow NXT. So for the handful of people that were actually getting introduced to Carmelo Hayes for the first time here, you already cut his feet out by having Logan Paul downplay him. Even if I haven't been following what the guy's been doing down in developmental, the fact that they called him up should tell you something. Shows the guy's made some kind of progress. So I didn't like that Logan promo. It was the wrong kind of heat promo to do. When you're telling the fans this new guy isn't important, it doesn't matter who's delivering the promo. It makes the people start to question the validity of the statement. And then there's the actual match. And I was trying to think the best way to describe it by the time it was over. At first I was going to say it looked like a cruiserweight having a match with a taxi driver in leopard print trunks. But if I'm actually trying to be serious in my evaluation, maybe I'm just overly critical, but it looked like two green NXT guys having a sloppy indie match on live cable television. Sorry. That's just kind of how I see it. It actually very closely resembled something I would expect to see on a Rampage. Two prelim guys having a back and forth moves match where they hit all these incredible aerial stunts in these really convoluted looking spots. It looks visually impressive, but you can tell a lot of it's pre-planned because they have to be sure they're in the right place to take some of the moves. It's not so much a wrestling match, but more like aggressive parkour. And then after watching guys getting dropped on their necks and heads for like 10 minutes, the finish is a guy winning with a top rope leg drop. Meanwhile, there were like 8 other moves prior that looked more lethal and more devastating that could have been actual finishes. I mean, Carmelo Hayes winning wasn't really a surprise. The crowd sort of got into his stuff by the end of it, but I think that was another issue with the match. People were eerily quiet for a lot of it. Probably because, like I alluded to a minute ago, I guarantee you a good chunk of this audience did not know who Carmelo Hayes was. I don't know how much advertising they did prior to this to let everybody kind of know his background. I mean, they aired a quick little highlight reel for him, but it didn't really explain who the guy was. Maybe that's something they ought to have considered. Give the guy some promo time beforehand. Do some kind of video package to let us know his backstory before we see him wrestle. That way it doesn't seem like a cold match where they just throw the guy out there and expect people to care. That's an AEW mentality. That's expecting the audience to already know who the guy is before we see him work. Again, doesn't matter where he's come from. He's a new guy. He's a fresh face. Introduce him. Talk to the people about him. Tell us why we should care. I don't know. I didn't hate this segment. I just probably would have gone about booking it a different way. Maybe start with Carmelo wrestling somebody who doesn't look like a bag of moist vanilla pudding. There's a good start. I'm glad they put Carmelo over. He's going to advance in the tournament. They actually have brackets now. That's a good thing. The last time, I don't even think they got that far. They just had names. So, hey, we're making progress in the world. One step at a time. And then we moved on to the other tournament round. It's Kevin Owens versus Austin Theory. This is where Logan informed us that Owens looks like a delinquent 5th grader that takes PE dodgeball way too seriously. Which I did find rather amusing. Now, see, that is an example of a heel being a good heel by taking underhanded shots at the babyfaces, but not actually bearing him. Because at least in this case, I mean, it's kind of true. I mean, if there's one thing we can universally agree on when it comes to Kevin Owens, love him or hate him, the guy always kind of dresses like a bum. It's kind of his gimmick. The fact that he's a fat, out-of-shape slob that dresses like the school bully. Nothing new there. Regardless of the repugnant physique, though, the one thing I can never take away from Owens, that dude can go. I actually ended up enjoying this a lot more than I thought I would. Kind of like the previous match, though, it took a while for the crowd to warm up to it. They had him there by the end, but there was a good chunk early on where the people were just kind of meh about the whole thing. Not really reacting to much. They had an interesting idea going here with Owens having the bandaged wrist. That kind of plays into the story of when Theory and Fodder broke it a couple weeks back. I'm assuming that's kayfabe. Christ, with this company, you never know, though. So Owens kind of spent most of the match selling that during the higher impact moves. Generally, it turned into one of those contemporary matches where, everyone has to kick out of everything and milk every near fall known to man. That can get annoying sometimes. You know, especially when you see shit that looks really impressive that could logically end the match, but then they just keep going. Yeah, they built up to the deal at the end where KO went for the stunner on Theory, but Theory grabbed the wrist and started targeting it. And then right as Theory goes to kick KO's wrist into the ring steps, he throws him back in, tries to set him up for the A-Town down, but KO fires back and decks Theory with the supposed loaded cast. And then Owens just kind of pinned Theory right there. And he kind of played it up afterwards like, hey, I mean, I was just defending myself, but this cast might come in handy. Of course, it can't really be counted as a weapon because, again, he was just using it to protect himself. You know, so I'm sure Theory will find a way to try to protest that call. The other thing I noted here, apparently Kevin Owens has the Billy Kidman gimmick, where anytime someone's tried to superplex him, he's going to counter it into that spinning cradle suplex he usually does. So it's like the whole, you don't powerbomb Kidman discussion. You don't superplex KO. You'll pay for it. Again, it sucks to see Theory being utilized as job fodder, but I don't think anybody's expecting Owens to lose the tournament, so I mean, you kind of had to put him over here. I mean, I don't even know what a good second option would be at this point if it's not Owens. Maybe Lashley. But he's a heel right now, so I don't even really know how that would work. Yeah, Carmelo Hayes might be the dark horse, but I highly doubt they're going to have that guy win it. And they could, but we'll see what they do. And then we had more Bloodline gold. Roman's in the back bitching about Randy Orton ruining Solo's moment earlier. So while he's talking about the fact that someone needs to handle the job and put Orton out of commission, Jimmy's sitting there like, well, I can do it, big dog. But I think there's a job better suited for the tribal heir. Of course, he says it in a condescending manner, just to show that he's still bitter about Roman bypassing him earlier on for Solo, which is great. So as Roman goes, now this is something you can handle yourself, Jimmy. Think about what the future holds for you if you take out Orton tonight. And then Jimmy gets all excited about the possibility of getting back in the hunt for Roman's throne. So he goes, yeet. Which gravely offends Roman. And in the best exchange of 2023, Roman does the slow turn to look at Jimmy. Jimmy is desperately trying not to laugh while Roman's giving him the death glare. And then Jimmy goes, no yeet. Jimmy Uso might be my new favorite wrestler right now. I was not feeling the whole singles push for him for the longest time. But now that I'm seeing Jimmy in this role, doing his own thing away from Jay and getting the chance to be a heel on his own, I think I'm starting to come around to him. He's starting to get a lot more comfortable on camera as a heel. And it's showing. So, well, after that, I sort of took a break and walked away for a little bit. There were a few pre-tapes I glossed over entirely. One of which I think involved Karrion Kross. The only thing I can say about that is, seriously, why are they even bothering at this point? Just pull the fucking plug, dude. It's over. There was also a pre-tape with Damage Control that I didn't watch. All I remember is that it was overproduced and dramatically terrible. The acting was appalling. But it did sort of tie in with the VTR they showed moments prior with Charlotte Flair. And, I want to take a minute to address that because, well, yeah. It was very scary. Now again, I didn't watch the entirety of last week's SmackDown, so I didn't actually see the match with Charlotte and Asuka. But they showed the footage of the spot where Charlotte and Asuka were climbing up to the top rope to try to set up... Christ, I don't even know what it was. Probably some kind of superplex. And you always hear me groan when I see people doing that spot in matches. Just because of the fact that it's so unnecessary a lot of the time. And it's all just a lame excuse to try to pop the crowd. And unfortunately, this was a spot that went horribly awry for both parties. And it nearly ended in Charlotte crippling herself and ending up in a wheelchair for the rest of her life. What appeared to happen was both girls slipped on the turnbuckle pad, and they both came crashing down to the mat. Asuka was able to sort of cushion the fall by landing on her back. Charlotte, though, I mean, she basically went ass over tea kettle and not only got her leg hung up on the rope, but then she basically spiraled back and landed right on the back of her neck. And the amazing thing about it was, you know, the announcers are sitting there talking about how she's going to be out of action, recovering for the next 9 months from a leg injury. And I watched that spot over and over again. And I was like, leg injury? Fucking chick landed right on the back of her neck. How the fuck was it her leg that got banged up? Yeah, somehow Charlotte folding herself on the back of her neck wasn't the critical injury. No, it was her leg getting caught up on the top rope when she flung herself back and landed in the middle of the ring. And it was hard to watch the first few times. You know, but I wanted to actually see what happened because, at first glance, it was hard to tell what went wrong. But I think it was as simple as the turnbuckle pad being too slippery. Both girls lost their footing and took a nasty spill. And again, man, it all goes back to my initial comment. Was the spot necessary? Probably not. Would the match have been hurt without either girl attempting to do a superplex? No. But it's just the mentality of so many people in today's business, to where they think they have to do all this dumb high-risk shit to pop the crowd and get a reaction. Otherwise, they're not doing the right thing. And I keep saying it over and over again. The day is going to come where one of these risky spots is going to backfire. Someone's going to cripple themselves. You know, thank God Charlotte was all right. And look, I know I'm a heavy critic of hers. I don't like Charlotte as a wrestler or an on-screen personality. I think she's obnoxious. I think she's incredibly overrated. I hate the way this company has spent the last decade trying to ram her down my throat as an all-time great when she's far from it. But I'm also not a complete heartless bastard. I don't like seeing people get hurt. You know, I'm glad she was able to basically walk out of there on her own 2 feet. Apparently she's going to be out of action for a while. Again, I think they said 9 months. You know, it sucks, but hey, when you do stuff like this and you put fate in the hands of gravity, the one thing that always reigns true, gravity wins. It is undefeated. So what's the lesson in all this? Don't do dumb shit like this. Cut out the fucking superplex spots. They're too dangerous. I can never see a superplex spot in wrestling ever again, and I won't be offended. Just stop. Now, staying on the subject of the girls momentarily, there was a Kabuki Warriors versus Zelina Vega Mia Yim match. And yeah. I only have so much patience. I like Mia, but it was late. I already had a long day. I don't think I'll lose sleep over having not watched a Kabuki Warriors tag match in WWE. So we'll happily look over that one and move on. Main event time. It's Randy Orton versus Jimmy Uso. Featuring my favorite angle in modern TV matches, where they go through the entire ring set of entrances for both guys. They ring the bell to start the match. They wrestle for approximately 30 seconds and then immediate cut to the break. I think I now understand why nobody gives a shit about wrestling matches in WWE. How could you? I mean, the match itself was kind of whatever. Orton was apparently breaking out his Ronnie Garvin tapes during his time off, because he was hitting all the Garvin stomps in this match. He was going after various limbs on Jimmy. They let Jimmy cut him off for a little bit of heat, but by and large, it was mostly a one-sided beatdown. They had a second commercial pitch where Jimmy dumped Orton over the top rope to the floor, and Orton allegedly tweaked his knee. Didn't really go anywhere, though, because he didn't even bother selling it during the comeback. And then right at the finish, as Orton's setting up Jimmy for the draping DDT, Solo's music cues up, and he comes out and starts making a beeline to the ring. But who should be in hot pursuit but L.A. Knight? Yeah. So he cuts off Solo with the pass, which then leads Jimmy to try to spin Orton around to catch him off guard. But then Orton just drops Jimmy with an RKO and pins him. And they were sort of playing up the tension between Orton and Knight earlier in the show. Kind of the show of respect between two babyfaces, but they also made it known that they have similar goals in mind. They both want Roman. They both want the Universal title. So it's one of those stay out of my way, I'll stay out of your scenarios. It's hard to tell if we should be looking into that more. If that is a feud they want to capitalize on down the road, someone would have to turn heel in that situation. And I have a hard time buying the fans are going to want to boo either guy at this point, especially LA Knight. But we'll see. I think they were just mainly honing in on the big-headed personalities of both talents. It's like, yeah, they're baby faces, but they also have an edge to their characters. So I like how they aren't directly on the same page. It's kind of like, yeah, I'll watch your back if the bloodline are working the numbers game on you, but don't expect me to send you an invite to the next wedding ceremony kind of thing. And then there was all the post-match stuff, which is usually what we tend to focus on a lot of the time. So we get Roman jumping LA Knight in the aisleway, while Orton just kind of looked on in disgust. Didn't really do much to try to pursue Roman. He just kind of watched him. And eventually Roman gets in the ring. He and Orton start going blow for blow. And here come the rest of the bloodline to attack Orton. Then a minute later, here comes LA Knight to join the fray again to help out. And of course, it's still 3-on-2 numbers advantage for the heels. So while it looks like the bloodline's about to gain the upper hand, who should make his return but AJ Styles, wearing all black for the occasion. And he ends up laying waste to Roman with the phenomenal forearm. Starts laying into him with some punches before the other babyfaces help clear out Solo and Jimmy. And all kind of seems right with the world at that point. You get 3 babyfaces and 3 heels. The good guys stand tall while the heels all powder and retreat up the aisleway. Seems like a very simple conclusion to the show. But of course, we couldn't do without our Russo swerve for the week. So what should happen? But AJ spins LA Knight around and sucker punches him in the jaw. And then after he leaves the ring with his back turned to his fellow comrades, he then storms past the rest of the bloodline. The same group whose asses he was just kicking a minute ago, mind you. Now he just casually strolls by them while everybody looks around dumbfounded. Well, that made no sense. And, well, I guess the obvious question is, why? I have no explanation. Other than the simple fact that AJ's a dick. I have no idea what led to him punching out LA Knight. I have no idea why he would come back to beat up the Bloodline in a revenge angle, only to then wind up walk right by them as they stand there in complete stunned silence. It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, rationally speaking. But I'm sure we'll get some kind of lame, idle excuse for why AJ, quote-unquote, returned as a babyface and then turned heel in the same segment. I guess the all-black look gives him the element of surprise. Like we're just not supposed to know what side of the fence he falls on. To me, I didn't really get it. Just kind of seemed like a pointless swerve for the fuck all of it. Not because any of us saw it coming, but because no one would have even thought about it happening. Because again, it makes no fucking sense. So you all can judge that one, but I'm out to lunch. I can't help you out with that one. But generally, I would say the show gave us some stuff to look forward to for Rumble season. Again, I don't really have much of an interest in Roman and Randy for the title, but I mean, you kind of had to figure that was going to be a buffer program between now and Mania season, so I kind of get why they're doing it. Yeah, they're keeping LA Knight fresh in the main event picture, which is good. The U.S. title tournament isn't really doing a whole lot for me in a way of piquing my interest right now, but I mean, at least it's giving some of the TV matches a purpose. You know, as always, the girls' stuff just continues to exist on the program. It's never going to move the needle one way or the other, but, you know, they feel obligated to include it because you don't want to piss off the Whammon fans out there. You know, again, the Charlotte injury sucks. But, you know, even with her gone for the foreseeable future, is it really going to affect much in the way of the damage control story they're working on? To me, it all just seems like they're eventually leading to everybody in the group turning on Bayley. How soon? Beats me, but I would prefer they don't wait too long to blow it off, because I'm kind of over it already. All in all, not a bad show, not a great show, but good enough for them to get by and keep the hype going for Rumble season. And as we wind things down for the year, NXT from this week in history celebrated a landmark occasion. Episode 200. And what does that mean? Well, from what I was able to gather, nothing. It was just happenstance that we arrived at the 200th episode of NXT. But there really wasn't anything remotely special about the occasion. We did get Hunter coming out at the beginning to talk to the people. And it's sort of the usual spiel we've heard from Triple H time and time again. NXT is the fans' product. It's their show. And he talked about some of the great talents that have come up through the system. Names like Damian Sandow, Cesaro, The Shield, the Wyatt family. Of course, the name that everybody popped for, Big E. Yeah. Kind of forgot how over Big E was at one point. You know, back when he was doing the whole King Kong Bundy gimmick and winning all of his matches via 5 counts. That actually got over. But that was pretty much all there was to the segment. I did like Hunter finishing by saying, but you guys didn't want to hear me come out here and talk for 20 minutes. Nice little homage to those classic Raw opening segments from back in the mid-2000s. You know, when Hunter would be out there cutting rambling heel promos for like half the goddamn show every week. Yeah, good times. So from there, we go to our opening match for the week. It's Sami Zayn and Tyson Kidd versus Leo Kruger and Cesaro, with Alexa Bliss filling in for the ring intros this week. Yeah, they're just juggling ring announcers around like rubber balls. Just keep that roster rotation going. You know, eventually you'll settle on somebody who doesn't sound like a generic robot. Oh, don't get me wrong. Alexa was horrible. But at least she actually had a pretty steady career in WWE as an on-screen personality. She also looked cute in a blouse. Had to point that out. Anyway, this was mostly designed to further along the development in the Sami Zayn, Leo Kruger / Antonio Cesaro feud. And I actually learned something here too. I forgot that Cesaro and Zayn actually had already wrestled previously. Now, of course, this would have happened well before we started the Retro Review series. You know, apparently they had shelved the rivalry for a while after the first match, even though people were already calling it Match of the Year, which the people did as soon as Sami and Cesaro got in there for the first time. Overall, it was a pretty enjoyable tag match. Heels cut off Tyson and worked him over for quite a bit of time. Sami got the hot tag later on. I did know that somewhere in here, Byron Saxton had commented about Cesaro beating him up and leaving him for dead in the aisleway the other week, which got me thinking, were there no consequences for Cesaro attacking a commentator? You could just do that and get away with it? Byron didn't even seem shaken up by it. He was just like, I don't get it, man. It was totally uncalled for. If I were Byron Saxton in that situation, I'd have been suing Cesaro for every penny in his pocket. What an idiot. So anyway, they're doing the four-way breakdown at the end. Tyson does a big cannonball dive out to Cesaro on the floor. And then Sami came back and hit the haluva kick on Leo for the pin. I still have no explanation for why they had Leo Kruger pin Sami clean last week, just to turn around a week later and have Sami get his win back. It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but that is 50-50 WWE booking for you. And then we had one of the all-time worst women's segments on this program since, probably the last time we talked about a women's segment. And you know why it was horrible? Because it involved acting. And not just acting, but cable access level acting. Elementary drama performance acting. I will not go into broad detail for the sake of my well-being and yours. What I will say is that it involved Natty and Emma arguing back and forth, reciting some of the worst scripted verbiage I think I've ever heard. And the payoff, I'll just go ahead and recite the material because I need you to understand that this is the kind of shit that NXT talents were being told to do back in the day. These are what Hollywood scriptwriters were being paid to come up with. You needed a degree to write this shit. Natty challenges Emma to a match to figure out who's going to wrestle Paige for the Divas belt. And it ends with Natty and Emma agreeing to the match. And then they went back and forth with things such as good, perfect, wonderful, tremendous, marvelous. I believe I heard a fantabulous. And then they both said bye at the same time. They turned their back to each other. They stood there awkwardly for about 20 seconds. And then Emma did her wacky little dance. Okay. Let me back up. I want to repeat what I just said a minute ago. In order to qualify for a position on the WWE creative team as a quote-unquote Hollywood scriptwriter, you needed a degree to write what happened in this segment. Words cannot begin to describe how awful it was. I would encourage you to go watch it yourself to just understand the pain that I suffered through having endured it. I don't even think I would wish that on my worst enemy. Chinese water torture would probably be more preferable than having to watch something like this again. Injecting a sharp projectile into my jugular would be more gratifying. Horrible. And then they came back to show a replay of a Bryan Danielson-Chris Jericho match from way back in the day. Yeah, back when NXT was still being treated as a knockoff Tough Enough show. I'm sure that one had all the internet fans drooling. Seeing a very young Daniel Bryan showing up on the scene and going toe-to-toe with Jericho in a TV main event. Funny how both those guys ended up wrestling in AEW like 10 years later. And just like the NXT match, no one remembers it ever happened. So then it was back to the ring for more girls action. This is where I joked to myself, maybe I should go try to find that Jericho-Danielson match and watch that instead. It'll surely be better than Sasha Banks versus Paige. I wish I were kidding. Here's the first thing I wrote down here. 5 seconds in, Sasha was giving Paige Jenna Maraska girly slaps to the boobs. And Paige sold it. I was like, dude, what the fuck? I mean, I always knew Sasha was overrated, but Jesus H. Christ. This is the chick people are salivating over to come back to WWE? This girl? I'm not even kidding you. Go back and watch it if you don't believe me. Sasha was giving Paige mean girl paintbrush slaps to the breasts. This is the fakest shit I've ever seen. Then to make matters worse, Sasha began streaming like a harpy for no reason. She had Paige in a fake chinlock at one point. I don't even know how that's humanly possible, but she pulled it off. And finally at the end, Paige ducked a running charge so Sasha could accidentally kick Summer in the face. And then Paige did her wacky going around her elbow to get to her wrist neck breaker. Terrible. Absolutely terrible. Oh, and speaking of terrible, we had more hideous acting and bad comedy sketches. This time featuring Enzo Amore, Big Cass, and Aiden English. Getting into arguments over who the better singer was. Again, I remind you all, this is what internet marks were claiming was the shit back in the mid-2010s. Just remember that. When you are questioning whether to take credible advice from marks over what company is superior, these same people are the ones that are still pumping up AEW as the greatest thing in the world. And look where we are now. So just to clarify, Enzo has a broken leg, so he's in a wheelchair and temporarily confined, which means Big Cass is stuck wrestling solo. And apparently that means he's now going to be feuding with Aiden English but not by wrestling, by singing. They are allegedly going to have a singing contest. Again, this is what marks were claiming was so great. This is what people are saying, you have to tune in to see this. This is the future of pro wrestling right here, brother. Oh, I'm sure it was. I'm sure everybody was salivating at the idea of seeing Big Cass and Aiden English sing. Yeah, because that's sports-based wrestling right there. Fuck, dude. This is why I never go with the collective mindset, because everyone's full of shit. And then we had the most WWE segment of the Vince McMahon era. So the Ascension come down to issue an open challenge to any tag team on the planet. Doesn't matter if they work for another company or if they work in the company. So, of course, who should answer the challenge but the American Wolves, Davey Richards and Eddie Edwards, a critically acclaimed tag team that wrestled for years on the indie circuit, mostly gaining their notoriety for the work they did in Ring of Honor years ago. So, of course, because they're on WWE turf, we know it's the American Wolves. We know Davey and Eddie. We recognize the faces. Christ, they had pretty much the exact same ring gear they wrestled with in Ring of Honor. So, of course, not only is their team name changed from the American Wolves to the American Pit Bulls, but they are also given completely generic Walmart greeter names. I didn't even write them down, they were so absurd. Jake McGillibuddy and Farquaad Dorkstein. Just two completely unmemorable, non-specific white guy names. Immediately making them look like total nobodies. They don't get a graphic. They don't get anything to indicate to the people, hey, these guys are actually somebody. They're a well-established tag team that can actually work. And it's funny because the announcers are putting over their history. They're talking about how established they are. So it's like, okay, did you need to doctor it up by presenting them as completely unrecognizable? Did you have to put your corporate spin on them to claim them as your own? God almighty. And then, of course, the Ascension just barrel over them in like 2 minutes, making them look like total throwaway job guys. And I mean, they gave Davey and Eddie a little bit of offensive flurry toward the end, but I mean, if the idea was to showcase the Wolves here and show the people what they're really capable of doing in the ring, piss poor job. Back to ROH for those meager saps. Or wait a minute. Were they working for Ring of Honor at this point? Or are they in Impact by now? I know Eddie spent a long time working there. I know Davey ended up leaving wrestling for a period of time to go pursue something in the medical field. I mean, he had only just gotten back into wrestling in the last year or two. Really solid tag team. Just a shame they were never picked up on by a major promotion before they kind of broke apart and started doing their own thing as singles guys. And then we went to the back for a real groundbreaking interview with Kofi Kingston, with Kathy Kelly asking the real hard-hitting questions. Kofi, how does it feel being in NXT? Yeah, Kathy Kelly doing the real journalisming there. Journalisming all over the place with those wonderful journalistic questions. I'm sure it took her hours to come up with that. So Kofi talked about how great it was being a part of the 200th episode of NXT. And then Lana showed up, issued a challenge on behalf of Rusev for next week's program. And that was it. Okay, cool. We'll get to see Kofi wrestle on NXT. As not part of the New Day. Just as good old Kofi. Kofi Mania, baby. Running wild here in the black and gold brand in 2013. These segments are astoundingly horrible, by the way. The acting, hideously revolting. And this was good in comparison to the other pre-tapes we got on the show. So with that, we come to the TV main event. In a Lumberjack match, it is Bo Dallas versus Adrian Neville for the NXT Championship. Round 2. And among the Lumberjacks at ringside we had pretty much every interchangeable job guy WWE had under contract at the time. I don't think I recognized a single one of them, with the exception of one man. And I actually had forgot about this until a Chris Van Vliet interview I saw a while back where he actually discussed the first time he got released from WWE during a trial period. Who should be among the Lumberjacks at ringside but L.A. Knight? Yeah. Now, of course, at this point, I had no idea what his name would have been. Did he even have a name? Couldn't have been Eli Drake, because that was when he was in Impact. But it was cool seeing him. L.A. Knight was a lumberjack. Not in the literal sense. He looked like $1 million. Great shape. You could tell he was somebody that they could have done something with. And I don't think it was long from this point where he kind of resurfaced in TNA about a year or so later, and it's kind of where his popularity took off. Once a company realized, fuck, this guy's actually got talent. Who'd have thunk it? Impact Wrestling saw that potential. WWE didn't. Amazing. We also had the Fink here to do these special ring intros. And at first I'm sitting there like, what the fuck? They brought in Howard Finkel as a special guest ring announcer? The hell weren't they using him full time? He had to have been on the payroll. And he seemed like he was in good enough health. Would have been better using him than half these lifeless jabronis they were using at the time. Now, of course, the thing on everybody's mind here, why exactly a lumberjack match? Now, if I had to guess, I presume it was to prevent Bo Dallas from taking a powder midway through the match and trying to win via countout like he did the first time. Actually, no, he didn't win the first match, did he? Neville won the match, but Bo stayed out on the floor and then forced the ref to count him out. Yeah, that's right. That way he could keep the title. Oh, I should note here, too, Tyler Breeze was also one of the Lumberjacks. He was more so of a plant to kind of advance the story forward because, you know, right before their commercial break, Breeze tried to throw Neville back into the ring, but Neville basically cold-cocked him in the face and laid him out. So, I mean, they pretty much spoiled what was going to happen at the finish. Match was all right, but I think because you had all the Lumberjacks at ringside, you were evidently just kind of waiting to see the big angle at the end. I did like the fans chanting Bo ring during a chin lock in the heat session. Yeah, Bo spent a while beating up Neville until he dodged a bulldog attempt and started firing back on Bo. And then they do this wacky finishing sequence where Bo tries to escape out to the floor, but all the Lumberjacks grab him and restrain him in a prone position so Neville can do the big senton out to the floor and wipe everybody out. And of course, it's one of those domino effects where guys are just bumping even though Neville comes nowhere close to making contact with them. But he throws Bo back in the ring, tries to set him up for the red arrow, and then while the ref's distracted with one of the lumberjacks on the floor, Tyler Breeze comes in and yanks Bo out of the way so Neville crashes on the ring mat. And then Bo crawls over and steals the pin. Kind of a predictable finish. I mean, they had the fucking camera on Breeze the entire time, so you knew he was evidently going to interfere at the end somehow. But it's another screw job finish in the Dallas Neville feud. But now they're kind of weaving Breeze into the mix, and I can tell you the fans are going to be stoked for that. It's one of those oddball scenarios where everybody's picking up on the fact that he's supposed to be a heel, but he's like also one of the more entertaining gimmicks they have at that point. He's also a guy that's kind of fallen off the map recently. So it's interesting how they're immediately kind of throwing him back into the title equation like that. But it's a new wrinkle. Keep things unpredictable for the time being. Now that Neville's basically fighting an uphill battle against two heels. Sammy's feuding with Cesaro at the moment, so he's not really involved in the title mix. I think Tyson Kidd eventually gets in there too, but I'm not exactly sure when that is. It's good stuff, though. I like everything they're doing to keep the feud fresh. Nothing is stale. And even if the 200th episode of NXT didn't really have anything momentous happen, it was still a relatively good show. I hated all the backstage skits, but that's mostly just because of the way WWE scripts all that shit out. Where everybody's basically told what to say verbatim in the most robotic manner imaginable. And God, the material they have to recite is so bad. I mean, there have been a handful of talents over the years that have made that shit work to a degree. But God, dude. The ones that weren't naturals on camera, it's really fucking bad. That Natty Emma sketch, that was an all-timer. All-time horrible. But even so, they keep things moving, and it's a mostly serious program. And it's the one thing I always enjoy about going back and seeing some of these older tapes. Even though there's a bit of wacky comedy thrown in there, you can see that they're at least trying to elevate talent. They're trying to tell stories, give people incentive to come back every week and check out what's going to happen. And even this week, too. Good tag opener. Even if I hated seeing the American Wolves get presented like total nobodies. They had a fine match with the Ascension. Main event was good, although unspectacular. So they're doing the right things. It's a growing pain stage with NXT. And I talk about it all the time. They're still kind of trying to find their footing in this whole thing. But with one more episode in the can before we close out the year, well, actually, I kind of talked about it earlier. I'm not going to be reviewing that episode because I want to do that year-end special. So we'll probably not end up doing another NXT recap until the first week of January. So if this turns out to be the last of the 2013 reviews, so be it. It was a good way to go out. Just like we're going out right now, because fuck. It is late. And I got to edit this thing tomorrow at some point. After I do more errands. Which I don't already have time for anyway. So thanks everybody for tuning into the channel. As always, make sure you subscribe, comment, like the show. Again, this coming Friday... Right now, I just would not plan on me doing a Friday edition this week. I think we're going to reconvene the following Monday, and we're going to do our 2023 year-end special, where we're going to look back and recount some of the good, bad, and ugly of the year in wrestling in 2023. I'm not exactly sure what topics I want to discuss at the moment, but I will keep you in the loop. So, take care, everybody. And actually, by the time this channel, or the next time we do a video on the channel, it'll probably be Christmas. So if you don't hear from me again beforehand, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, all the good stuff, and take care. Peace out.